welcome to Me in Bloom. I am May and I work with holistic living and healing. I share a bit of that on this channel, and I also have a podcast where I talk about that. I have an Instagram as well, and basically just everything holistic living from a deep global perspective is what really gets me excited. And today's subject is one I think is also fitting into holistic living, and it's about, obviously we talk about slow living here, and I've shared a bit about my ideas, and I think even the podcast that is coming out, that came out last weekend, is also about that, but it's about slow living in a big city. But today I wanted to talk about slow content, and from a perspective of a creator as well as a consumer. So basically that's the subject of today's video. And I thought this was very important to talk about because, like I said, that I feel when you talk about mindful existence, which is basically what comes down when you think about slow living, it's a way for you to tap into your own rhythm. It's a way for you to tap into your own pace in life and your own way of doing things, to the degree where you're not just being pushed along and whipped along through a fast-paced society, but you are deciding for yourself, how do you actually want to navigate, and which pace and which path are you taking from a more mindful and aware perspective. And especially as a person of color, as a woman of color, I think those are such important subjects for us to think about and reflect on in our own personal lives, because we often don't realize that the world and the way it works, it's not just because it's the best way, it's because this is the way that has been created into the systems and presented to us by the people who have benefited the most from those systems, whether you're talking about patriarchy or you're talking about racism and all of this, or colonial thought or an imperialistic ambition. All of those things come into play when we reflect on the systems that we've normalized as the only way to exist, whereas they're not really neutral, but they're just what has been imposed to us in our current existence. But also, I always believe that whatever is created by humans can be changed by humans, and nothing is too daunting as long as we're willing to do the work needed to unlearn and reimagine the way of existence that we could have on this planet or in our personal life. Now, as somebody who obviously consumes content but also creates content, this has been a subject that has been on my mind for years, especially because I'm also somebody who's multi-passionate. Like, I love to do so many things, and so there's only so many hours in the day, and there's only so much energy I can have. And then on top of that, I have a normal full-time job that also takes a lot of my time and energy. So when it comes to my free time, when it comes to the spaces in between, how I consume and how I create is quite important, that I have a reflection on that, and that I'm quite aware of what is the purpose of the way I create, what is the intention behind the way I create, who has taught me that this is how things have to be. My first introduction to the internet was something of liberation, something of immense information that could teach you things that you weren't able to find in your everyday life. And I also particularly loved the idea of being able to search and curate the things you wanted to learn by just what the things you read and you found online, or the communities you engaged with. Now, this is like early 2000s, obviously, and since then the internet has changed a lot. Even this platform, I remember my first YouTube channel was in 2007, so basically a year after YouTube was created. And I remember back in that time how those who created content, it was such a different world. Of course, you can imagine that, especially if you're my age or even older. It was such a different world, and it was before this platform, of course, became monetized. It was before a lot of like advertisers and businesses also were like, "Ooh, there's something here that we need to tap into." It was just people behind cameras sharing about their lives. It was before the high quality, the good sound, the good light. Like, none of that really mattered. It was about sharing. You know, that was the main focus, creating something that you could share. So when it comes to slow content creation, the first thing to ask is basically, what is slow content? And if you do a bit of a search, you realize it's not something that is quite popular or talked about, but I think it will pick up. I really believe that, because as somebody who has been working on even accepting the fact that my brain, I feel, is very fast, but the way I execute and process stuff is very slow. Like, I am a slow creator, I'm a slow person, I'm just slow, even though there's certain things I do very fast. But I think about it also now in the way I create and take up space. So the basics of what slow content creation is a movement for a better web. Basically, the understanding that we can create an existence online that doesn't have to be more foreign than what we desire in our everyday offline lives, and that the natural way of existing can also be implemented in the way we interact and create online. I am all for this movement. It's a slow movement and it's growing slowly, but I think it's literally the future. The movement is also quite inspired by the slow food movement, in the sense of eating more mindfully and seeking out food that is locally produced. So basically, creating from a place and consuming from a place of realizing the bigger scope of things and being mindful of where your content comes from, but also as a content creator, where your content is going, what's the purpose of that content, and how you create it, right? I think specifically as a content creator, one thing I really love about it, and I've been practicing this on my own platforms like over the years, while trying to balance my, like I told you, being multi-passionate, having a full-time job, and trying to also still have time for the things I love to do and spend time with the people I love to spend time with. And I've been like editing the way I create, and even the frequency of how often I create, and even my own obligation or my own, what do you call it? The way I feel about the things I create and how often they have to be out there. I remember like just walking and then thinking, people don't need to see you that much. You do realize that. People don't need to have your content. And that might sound a bit weird, but what I mean about that is basically that I'm not offering a life necessity thing, you know? I'm creating because I want to create. But there's no reason I should feel the need to create, for example, once a week if I don't feel like it, right? So I came up with my own numbers, and they don't really mean much, as in like, why did I choose those numbers? For example, when people create the same, or they upload and create the same time each week, it's so that the people who interact with their content always know when to find their work, and also it's good for the algorithm, which is another thing that I think is important when you talk about slow content creation, because it's the idea that instead of following machines and doing what the machines want us to do so that our platforms can grow, our platforms can be preferred by the machine, you realize that you're human, and there's no reason I as human should be following a machine. And that's also the interesting thing about algorithms and people constantly trying to follow algorithms. It reminds me of this amazing TED Talk about title Life is Simple. I think I've talked about this before because it's one of my favorite TED Talks, and whenever I feel like I'm complicating life, I always revert back to it. And in it, there's a place where he talks about fashion and how and I would really recommend, if you haven't seen it, watch that TED Talk. It's so beautiful and so authentic, and so like, it awakens you and it makes you realize, oh, that is true. Life is simple. Why do we make it so difficult? And one of the things that he had changed in his life was even thinking about fashion in the sense of like, he said this really funny, cute sentence where he's like, we shouldn't follow fashion, because if you follow fashion, you have to keep following it. Just stay here. And I think that, of course, that's a metaphor that you can use for so many things. And I think we could also apply that very way of thinking when it comes to the algorithm, especially as content creators. Why are you trying to follow the algorithm? It's not humans, it's not authentic, it's not organic. It's something that people have created from the key performance indicators based on business models, not particularly what is good for people, not particularly what is good for the people who engage with your content, not particularly what is good for your creativity, not particularly what is good for the environment. Like, those things don't come into factor. So why would you want to follow something that is so unholistically created and often created with an agenda that is not really going to benefit you? So stay here, create at your own pace, create things that you value, create things that make you happy, and create things that you feel happy sharing, instead of trying to live up to the algorithm of what is expected, what is trending, what you think people are going to love on a big scale, you know? And that's another thing. It's about how we see the people who engage with our content as well. Now, this is particularly for content creators, the sense that the audience is sold to us as consumers, right? And before money came into the interwebs as such, and it was mostly about people connecting with people and sharing, where before people thought about making money online, it was just about the community. That was it. Like, you shared for the sake of sharing, and people conversed on the things you shared, and then you maybe felt less alone, or you made somebody happy and smile, or you shared how to do something that helps solve a problem, right? The idea of money wasn't really embedded in the original way that we approached the way we create online. This only came in later on. And then it became so overwhelmingly the focus of why people create, why they want to grow an audience. The idea is always to turn their audience into capital, right? Now, don't get me wrong, I am all for making a living doing the things you love. And I think in so many ways, the internet has provided people different ways of creating an income, which is beautiful, because I'm always for the individual practicing sovereignty and practicing and having practices that liberate them, even if it's financially. That's great, and it's beautiful, and it has purpose and it's a great evolution of the internet. But I'm also talking about the idea of mainly just seeing your audience as people you can sell things to, right? Seeing people as commodities that you can sell to brands or even social status, right? I feel like, in a way, because we try to please the machine, we ourselves begin to think like the machine, and we think in numbers, and we forget that behind each number is an actual person, and behind each view is an actual person. And just like when I am consuming content, I would hate to feel like somebody's just bombarding me with ways they can sell me stuff, right? Now, of course, if you have something that you've worked for and you're passionate about and you want to share it, I'm not against that. Even when I share about my holistic sessions, or when I share about my little market on my blog that I'm still to create. I swear this year it will be the year. Before this year ends, I will have my little marketplace on Bloom Baby Bloom. But I think there is a fine line of mutual respect, in the sense of realizing that the people on the other side, you who are watching this, and even when I'm the other side, that we don't engage. I don't go on the internet thinking, who can sell me stuff today? I go there for different reasons. Like, sometimes you're just bored, sometimes you want to just check out on your favorite platforms that you follow, check in with people you care about online. But unless I'm going to buy something, and then I'll go directly looking to buy that thing. But I'm not there to feel like, oh, sell me stuff. Do you understand? And this idea of seeing humans as commodities or just consumers rather than community is quite damaging in its own way. By aligning ourselves and our values of creating an existence with those that exploit us, we ourselves then make it easier to become exploiters and normalize the idea of exploiting not only ourselves but exploiting others just for pure profit. And I think it's also quite complicated, because as people always say, like, there is no ethical consumption or business under capitalism. I don't know if that is to the extreme. Probably there are some, but it's harder for people to create businesses and for people to engage in capitalism without a form of exploitation. But when we go back to slow content creation, one thing that I really love about the movement is also the idea of directing the things you create from a place of purpose rather than a place of profit. Switching those two P's around. What is the purpose of what I create? What value will it give to the people who engage with it? What value am I getting from creating it? Is it just because it's Saturday or it's Wednesday or Friday whenever I post and I need content to be posted? Or does this video actually matter on a bigger scale? Does it matter in what I believe in? Does it matter in what I care about? Just basically remembering it's not about the quantity and producing, but rather it's about the quality, and even beyond quality, because we could also talk about the quality of your camera, or the quality of your audio, or even lighting, or even settings. But even moving beyond that towards value, like what value does it have, you know? It's so interesting because in nature, everything, though seeming chaotic and random, serves a purpose, right? And that purpose is ingrained in all natural members of nature that are not easily manipulated. It's only when we humans often change certain things and we tweak certain things that then we can divert the purpose of things towards our own wishes and wants, right? But in nature, everything serves a bigger purpose in its little actions and what it does. It adds to the bigger purpose of things. And when we think about content, I think that's also a beautiful way to think about it from a content creator, but also a content consumer. What's the purpose of engaging with this content? And what's the purpose of creating this kind of content, right? I think realizing this also made me see my own platforms quite differently. I've always tried to create with that idea, what's the purpose, right? Every now and then I'll get the rush and feel like I'm chasing something and be like, oh, hold on, what am I chasing? And who told me to chase it? Why am I using this as indicators of the success of my creations, right? Come back, tune in. What is true to you, right? And I hope, like, to some degree that is also visible on how I share and the things I share on my platforms, whether it's a Bantume, which is my more political and community-based channel, or whether it's this one that is based more on holistic living and creativity. I always hope that even when I look back at my content, that I could sense the purpose behind it. And it's not even about being extra deep or whatever, like, forget that. Purpose doesn't necessarily have to be a certain kind of thing, but it's the idea that you are directing the purpose of your content. And it's not just about making content or just about making profit from your content, right? Or hoping to one day make profit from your content, but realizing that you are adding to the intergalaxy of the webs. And what you create and how you create it would serve that ecosystem better if it's created from a place of intention. Does that make sense? So those are the main things I think can be applied as a content creator, like following your own path, staying true to your own purpose and passions, and also realizing that big is not the only way to exist on social media. You don't need a big following. You don't need everybody. You don't need 1 million subscribers. You need a community that you feel actively cares about what you create and gets value from what you create. At least for me, I feel like that makes my work even more meaningful for me. When I can see that people are enjoying it and people find value from it and people want to share it with other people. And even if it just makes you as a silent watcher, like go like, oh, interesting. Like that's good enough. Like sometimes I also thought about it because on the bigger scale, you know, like you realize that there are videos that get like millions of views, right? And you as maybe somebody with a smaller platform, like mine's usually get like on this platform like 100 or 200, right? And if you compare those two, you can think like, what do I need to do to get more views, right? And then I was like, why am I taught to think like that? Like, what do I need to do to get more views? Because then I was thinking, wait a minute, 100 people in a room is a lot. 200 people in a room is a lot. 2,000 people in a room is a lot. And 200 people who engage with my content and watch my stuff is not a nothing, and enjoy what you're producing. That is an amount that matters. Basically, even if it was one person who religiously watched your channel, maybe that would be weird because you're like, who's this one person? But just going back to the idea of the quality of understanding the value of the other person beyond how they can add to your own status, to your status on the platform, or to your growth and profit on the platform, but realizing those are people who took time to watch this video. Those are people who took time to engage with my platform. And by focusing more on the people I have rather than the people I can attract, I feel like I'm getting more enjoyment, even more enjoyment from creating, because I'm focusing more on the people I already have and who already enjoy my content. So that's another thing, like to refocus on the idea of bigger is not really better and more is not always better, but rather create things of value and appreciate the size of your platform at each stage, realizing that there are people behind those numbers and seeing those people as people who took the time to be like, oh, I like this platform enough, I'm gonna subscribe, and I'm going to check in every now and then and watch this person's content. And do you need everybody who subscribe to watch your content every time? No, because I don't even watch the content of the people I subscribe to all the time. But when I have time, when I see something that they created that I enjoy, I do check it out. The idea of existing for numbers is such an invasive way of existing. From a young age, just taught and programmed to value numbers. The higher, the better, the more, the better, right? In certain areas, like just controlled by numbers. And to tap out of that consciousness and be like, no, I'm gonna base my idea of success from the interactions, from how my creativity evolves, from what I'm inspired to create and how I feel about it once it's done. That's how I'm gonna base my idea of success in what I share, wherever I might share it, right? Of course, you can still create a platform that helps you share the things you love and maybe hopefully helps you live from the things you love, but with a grounding in a purpose that is not controlled or manipulated easily by these changing ideals and numbers and expectations for you to succeed on platforms, right? Also, I like to say, just because a platform is big and huge doesn't mean that they don't have those ideals and purpose. It's not the case. But I'm saying that there's a lot of smaller platforms, you know, and they are just as great as they are. Like, there's no need for everything to be this big empire. It's such an exploitative mindset, like everything, I'm building an empire. How has that worked out for a lot of people in the past? Not great. Why are we taught to value these ideas of business and existence and these ways of pursuing our dreams, that things have to be so big and they have to be so far-reaching and invasive and everywhere? Like, it's bullshit, basically. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I will see you in my next video, whenever that might be. I try to make 3 videos a month. I feel good with that number for now. I'd like to hear what you thought about this conversation, and also what you think about just slow content in general and slow creation in general, even as an artist. I didn't even get to that point. Anyway, I've enjoyed this conversation and I hope you have too, and I'll see you in my next video. Do take care, trust your own path and pace, and you are always going where you're supposed to be, in the pace that is natural to you, right? Like, every animal knows that except the human. Anyway, bye guys. Bye.